All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our, what did I call this? Oh, I called this all CRUD. I hope you guys enjoyed the name. Uh, I thought it was clever. Thank you, Marina. So yes, welcome. And we are going to build a full stack application. I don't know how far we're going to get today, but we'll just pick up every other week from where we left off until we have a basic CRUD application, and don't get too tied to the word basic. I don't mean that it's not hard. All of this stuff is hard when you're first doing it. It's just not going to be like a super complex technically with all of these crazy features, but this is going to give you the basics and the foundation so that way you can go do some crazy cool apps. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. This is meant for you guys, and can you guys see my GitHub?
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, this is going to be meant for you guys. So if you have a question, go ahead and say it in the chat or on mic if I'm not paying attention to the chat. I guess, Christine, can you on mic if there's a question and I miss it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep an eye on the chat.
All right, cool. So yeah, I guess let's do a quick vote before we get started. We can just do it in the chat. Do you guys want to start on the front end or the back end? I think we're going to try to just do one of the stacks today. So yep, go ahead and put in the chat if you have an opinion. All right, it's looking like back end is back end gang. All right, cool. Yeah, let's do back end. All right, so typically when I start a project, also caveat, I am not like the world's most expert developer. I also would say that anyone who tells you they are questions. There's always different ways of doing things. I focus on making things work and understanding the code that I write. But if you have a different way of doing something, you don't want to follow exactly what I don't care. I say make it work and kind of take it where you want to take it. So we will start on the back end. Does anyone have a CRUD application idea that we can build? I'm kind of tired of to-do lists, so put in the chat or on mic yourself if you have a good CRUD app. All right, bookstore's good. I guess, yeah, so put an idea in the chat if you have one and then react to it with an emoji based on what you like. I like how we're all like, bookstore is fine. All right, bookstore it is.
What's wrong with the to-do app?
I've just done so many iterations of the to-do app. I mean, we can do it, but we'll do a bookstore instead. So are we thinking, I think for just like the simplicity, we'll start with just creating books, like your inventory in your bookstore. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Jack. I'm very tired of a to-do app. Okay. So I start on GitHub. I go ahead and I click on new repository and then I name it. So we can say book CRUD. All right. You can make it public, private, whatever you like. I like to add a README, so there's a file already in it. And then I go ahead and click create a repository. There's lots of ways to do this. Like there's that phrase, there's lots of ways to skin a cat. There are, it's a gross phrase, but however your workflow works. So I'll go ahead and pull this over. Then I either open up VS Code or I just open up my terminal, but I have a configuration on my terminal set up, so I'm going to use VS Code instead. So I open up VS Code and then I open up the terminal at the bottom. And then I just go ahead to this little code button and I copy the HTTP link and I say git clone and then I paste it in. All right. And then I'm going to CD into it. Can anybody tell me what CD means?
I think it goes into that folder.
Yep, change directory. Yeah. Good job, everybody. So we're going to change the directory. So right now, when I'm in the Callie folder, I'm just in my root user folder. I want to get into this folder that I just cloned down, book CRUD. So what I type in if I wanted to see a list of all of the folders and files in my root folder? Anybody know?
LS.
Perfect, LS. All right, so I have a lot of things in there. If you don't have as many things, it's probably easier to read, but we named it book. Where are we gonna? I'm always on a Mac. That's where my knowledge level ends. All right, so CD into book CRUD, and now we're there. All right. So if you're just in your terminal and you have code turned on, you can just open it like code dot and it will open the repo up. Otherwise, you can also open up the window from here to open your folder. When you open a folder on VS Code, it's automatically going to put you in the right folder on your terminal too. All right, and now you'll see we have our README as well. All right, so typically when you are at work, you will create you're working on a team, right? So you're not going to start working on main and then everybody's going to be working on main. You're going to create what? What would you call it? A branch, perfect. So yeah, we're going to create a branch and that way we are going to divert from where we're at. So right now the main branch has this beautiful, very descriptive README, and we are going to create a branch to get off of it. All right, so I'm going to say get checkout -b and then my name of my branch. I always use CS, which are my initials, and then whatever I'm doing. So I might say like create API or something like that. All right, and then I usually push immediately too. It gives you this nice command. What this is just saying is that you want to create that branch that you have locally with Git. You want to create it on GitHub as well. All right, if I refresh my GitHub, you will see that now I have this branch here. Right now, both branches have the exact same code, but as I work, you'll see those change. All right, so we are going to use NestJS in order to create our API. And that is a GitHub repo. So NestJS is pretty easy to use. So we're just going to go to the documentation. Anytime I'm learning a new tool, I usually just go to the documentation and start with the like get started. So we have our installation here. I'll go ahead and copy this URL to the chat if that would be helpful. All right. And what we do from here is just to run these commands. Does anyone know what npm i-g does?
Installs Nest.
What's the -g part?
Global.
Perfect. Yep. So it's going to install it globally on my computer instead of just in this repo. I already have this installed on my computer, so you guys can go ahead and run it yourselves. And then we're going to use the command nest to create our project. And then whatever nest new to create a new project, and then whatever our name is. So nest new, and then maybe like, and then I always do API. It's going to create a folder that then it's going to put your API in. So if I open this up, I have my README, and then we're going to use I'm going to use the package manager npm. And now it's going to create an API folder with all of the files that we need inside it. All right. We'll do the similar thing with React for our front end. We're to use Vite, and you can use just the simple command to create a React application, and it'll put in a nice folder. Could I have two different repos for my front end and back end? Do they have to be in the same one? Yep, I could have two different repos. It just depends on how you want to do it. I think it's easier to work in one repo with two folders inside it, but some people like to have a separate repo for both one. All right, so now if I want to use my API, I have to cd, change the directory into that folder so I can use it. All right, if I go and look at the docs, you will see, all right, that all I have to do now is npm install and npm run start. What does npm install do?
I think it install all the packages within your package.json. Yeah, I think they're pretty good.
Yep, it installs or updates, yep, all of your packages in package.json. So these are all of the dependencies that NestJS has for us. All right, we can add new ones onto it if it turns out we want to use something new, or we can just use the ones that are in this list. All right, and the only way to use it though is that you have to install it. But package.json is a nice way. It gives you a list of all of your required packages. So I would do npm install to get those installed. And then you can see that we could do npm run start. Now, if I run npm run start, actually, let's just do this as an experiment. So npm run start is going to start my server. All right, the API is essentially a server. All right, so here we go. And you can see that I have, it tells you what routes I have. So I have just this root route slash, okay? And let's go figure out what port we're running on too. So the way I would do that is I would go into the source folder, all right? And then I would go to main. That's where everything starts for NestJS, all right? You'll see then that what we're doing is we are creating an app, all right? And then we are listening on port 3000, all right? So what would I type into my browser here in order to ping my API?
Localhost 3000.
And I see a hello world. So that's awesome. But what if I don't want it to say hello world? I need to go find where that's at. All right, so typically what you're going to have is you're going to have a request come in, and it's going to first go to a controller. This is where all of our routes are going to be set up, okay? So here we see that we have a get route. There's nothing in my get route, so I could have it like get cats, okay? And I would write it like that, okay? And then this turns into get cats, right? But when there's nothing there, it's just going to be slash, all right? So a request comes in. It's then going to hit this function get hello. What's happening in this get hello function?
It is calling the app service.
Yep. All right. So it's making a call to app service. So let's go and look at, yep, continue.
And then calling the function that is on that file.
Perfect. So here is our service. So controller is where you just are going to have your routes. You're not doing any of your application logic in the controller. You're just setting up, here's a route coming in. Maybe you'll have like a guard on the route saying like only admin users can do this, or only users that are logged in can do this, right? But that's pretty much it. From there, then you're always going to pass the information that you need for the application logic to the service file. The service is where you're actually going to do the work, okay? So when you first start with NestJS, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a little bit ridiculous. Why am I passing something around? But you want to keep your code modular, and this is the way to do it, all right? So you can see here that we're calling this get hello function, and then we're returning the string hello world, which is why we're seeing this hello world on our browser. But let's say I don't want to say hello world. I just want to say hello people. All right, I press save. If I refresh my page, what do you guys think is going to happen?
My guess is that it does nothing changes.
Okay, so Jay guesses nothing changes. Jack says it's going to say hello people. Let's refresh. And I'm sorry, Jay, or Jack, but Jay is correct. It still says hello world. And why is that? Anyone know?
Maybe we need to push that in the GitHub repo first.
We could go down this rabbit hole, but I'm going to just tell you the answer. No, because GitHub actually at this point has nothing to do with it. But what if I restarted my server? Let's see. So in order to stop your server, you do, if you're on a Mac, sorry, if you're on a Windows, I don't know the answer. You're going to Control-C, and that's going to stop your server. And then you could start it again with running the command again. Now, what's our guess? If I press refresh, what am I going to get?
Yeah, I was gonna change.
Hello, people. All right. So where did I get why did I run npm run start? Where did that come from? Does anyone know?
It's in the package.json.
Get it? Yes, it is. All right, so if we go to our package JSON, we are going to look for this section in our package JSON called scripts. Okay, so when you are running npm run start, what you're really doing is you're running this script here that says start. All right, and then what that script is doing is running this script, nest start. So you're actually running nest start to start your server. What do you think this one does here? npm run start dev. Yep, go ahead.
It watches for changes.
It watches for changes. So let's use that one instead. All right, so instead of using npm run start, we're going to use npm run start dev. So that way we're going to start it. All right, I refresh, it says, hello people. I go back in here and I change this to hello world. All right, and did you see that flash? That was my server refreshing, restarting. It's watching for changes in my code. Anytime you make changes to your code, it will restart now. I refresh, it says hello world. So that's just a small trick to save you a ton of time in development, is to watch your changes on the back end. React automatically watches your changes for you, which is nice, but a lot of APIs do not. Okay, so that is just a quick one on how to get started. Next, what is a CRUD application?
It involved with create, read, update, delete. If you if you include all 4 of these operations, then I guess it consists as a CRUD operation.
Okay, so we want to create a book, right, for our inventory. We want to be able to read the list of books that's in our inventory. We want to be able to update maybe the price of a book in our application, and we want to be able to delete a book. How are we doing this? How do I store all of this information? What do we need?
A database.
We need a database. All right, so we are going to use Postgres because I love Postgres. So let's go ahead and get that started. Getting a database set up with your application can be tricky, but we're going to do it. All right. So let's go ahead and search for that. So we can search for NestJS Postgres. All right. So you can see that we have the docs where you can go into the actual docs and read about the database. And then you can also see that there's several Medium articles. I honestly like to hop back and forth between docs and YouTube videos and tutorials. We can start with the docs, okay? What you'll see though as we go through the docs is that they are going to be using MySQL. So if you're not super familiar with like Postgres versus MySQL versus all the things, then maybe starting with a tutorial is easier so you can get like the exact code, but make sure to check back with the docs because those are going to be like your source of truth. All right, cool. So here we are going to be using an ORM. We're going to be using type ORM. All right, it's lots of controversial opinions about ORMs. I like type ORM. It's the integration that's used most frequently with NestJS. All right, so here we have another thing that we have to install. Does anyone know what the -- save does? Brianna, thank you. Yeah, I actually, here, so wait, -- save versus -- is that? Right here we have a Stack Overflow. So I'm pretty sure save is not necessary and it just adds it to your dependencies, and then save dev saves it to your dev dependencies, which we can play around with that later. All right, So when I am installing something new, I don't typically turn off my API. I typically add a new terminal, and then I run the commands there. So you would still need to CD into your API folder because we're going to be installing this for your API. But then from there, you can just copy this. I'm going to leave out the MySQL 2 because we aren't installing MySQL 2, but we are installing Postgres, which is PG. Okay. And it's thinking. All right. So did that install? Do I need? Yep, here we go. All right, so now we have type ORM and we have Postgres. Cool. All right, now we continue and we need to set up our connection to the database. All right, so we're going to go into the app module.ts file. So this is the file that kind of determines all of your imports, your exports, your controllers, and your providers. All right, so when you're making a more complex app, you will have different modules, right? So this is like the app, like the general app. But maybe if we're adding a bookstore, right? So maybe purchases, that if you were going to have like a database or table with all of your purchases, that could be a module in your API. Customers, that could be a module. And so basically anytime that you're going to have like a different like category to your API, you could add a different module, but we're just going to stick with the app module, controller, and service for now. All right. So you can see that what we need to do is we need to add our information to connect to our database in our imports array. All right, so we need to import the type ORM module. So go ahead and type it in. So we're going to say type ORM module dot for root. And then the curly braces. I did 2 of them. Sometimes I feel like Copilot is like too excited and he makes me type things wrong. Does anybody else feel that way? All right. All right, so type is going to be Postgres. I'm going to just tab this down and then click enter. All right, host is going to be localhost because we're going to, yeah, calm down Copilot. Yes, I agree. It's like, I don't like when he starts with like the opening of a parenthesis or a curly brace and then he doesn't close it because I like to open and close at the same time. So I feel like sometimes we get into a little bit of a fight. All right, then port 5432. Why are we doing port 5432? Anybody know? So that is just the port that Postgres runs on. Everyone runs on a different port. So MySQL is 3306. HTTPS requests are 443. You'll basically like each of these different things has like a default port. Okay. So port 5432. My username is going to be Callie Stoves Cup because that's like my user. Here. So I'm going to put Callie Stoves Cup. And then my password for Postgres is just an empty thing. Database, every Postgres instance that you have is going to automatically have a default database named Postgres. So if I try to connect to the database Postgres, it will automatically work because that's the default, it exists. But if I try to connect to, so let's say we want the database to be called book CRUD. All right, you'll notice that we're having errors in our server logs because it's saying that the database book CRUD does not exist. All right, so what is a tool that I could use to go check out my database? Thank you, Christine. All right, so yep, PG admin's a good one. Another one that I use at work is dbeaver. So because I don't have it installed on my computer, why don't we do that one together? I'm going to see if dbeaver is through, if we have a homebrew for it. It's dbeaver. All right, let's give this a try. So I'm going to open up a terminal, and then I'll go ahead and paste in brew install -- cask dbeaver community. I don't know if this is going to be right though, because I have to. Oh, okay. So here's the Windows installer. Oh, yep, you can use brew. What is it? Does anybody know what the cask is? Hmm. Interesting. Okay. So dbeaver community was successfully installed. I guess what I'm confused about is if I can install like, okay, wait, moving app, dbeaver app to applications. Okay. So let's now, and then, yep. All right, how's everybody doing with dbeaver? Does anybody need any help with getting dbeaver up? All right. So now that I have dbeaver up, it wants me to connect to a database. So I'm going to go ahead and select PostgreSQL because dbeaver is just a tool to connect to databases. You can pick any of these to use. All right. So then I'm going to click next. All right. And then now this is how your database is going to get configured. So we want to use localhost. We want to use port 5432. The database is going to be Postgres for now, because that's just going to be our default one. And then username, you go ahead and type in your username, and then password, mine is blank, because that's what my password is. All right. So now you'll see on the left that we have a database. Says I'm missing files, so I downloaded them. All right, so there's a lot of information on dbeaver or PG admin, whatever you use. But the way you get to it is you'll have your list of databases first. So you can see these are all of the databases that I have on my computer right now. All right. This is the default one. I'm using that for a different project, so we're not going to worry about it now. All right. But in order to create a new database, we're going to right click and then go to create new database. All right. And then here is where we will type in book_CRUD. All right. And then we'll go ahead and say, okay. So now I have this database. If you look in the schema, you'll see that there are no tables in it, which makes sense because I just created an empty database. But if we restart our server, we should see book dash. Oh, I did book_CRUD. That'll do it, huh? And I said it was book-CRUD. All right. Then let's go ahead and refresh. Maybe. Oh my goodness. All right. Let's try again, shall we? And I will not name it the wrong thing. Book-CRUD. All right, so now that's there. And let's try this again. Woohoo! Success! All right, So can anybody explain why I was getting that error and why creating this database fixed it?
My guess is that it cannot really connect to database earlier.
Yep, there was no database to connect to. Jack, you are correct. And now the database exists, so it can connect to it. Okay. So we have our connection ready, and now we have our book CRUD, but we are missing any tables. There's no tables in there. All right. So now we have to create a table. How do we create a table, or what is a table? I guess let's just start with what is a database table. So a database table is going to be where we store all of our information, and we can design it with a schema, and the schema is going to be the shape that the data is in. All right, so here is how we create that table and that shape of the data, the schema, with type ORM. We use something called an entity. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to open this up, and we can just create a file, and then we are going to call this file it's called inventory, or let's just call it books, I guess. Books dot, or book singular dot entity dot ts. All right, and then now in here, library would have worked too. Okay. So we are going to create the entity. The way we do that is an @ sign and then entity. And you can see that it's suggesting we import that from type ORM, and it would be correct. All right. And then we have the book itself is going to be a class. So here is where we are going to describe what a book looks like. I would think of it like each row in your table is going to be a book. Yes, I agree. I feel like I'm always like having a hard time thinking about like how I want to name my tables and singular plurals. The way I think of it is like the entity for a book, we're describing all of the characteristics of a book. And then when we add it to the book table, you have each row is a book, and then the whole thing is a library or a house of books type of a thing. But the entity we're describing is a book. Okay. So first thing here is we need an ID. Can someone explain to me why you would want an ID? Like, what's the point? Why not just say the name of the book?
Because you might have multiple books with the same name, possibly.
Exactly. You might have multiple books with the same name, but if you have a unique identifier, then you won't have multiple of the same. Okay. So yeah, so we're going to have ID is number, but we aren't. Oh, go ahead.
Your computer battery is a little low. Your laptop battery.
That tells you my personality type right there. You know, people who let their computer like almost die, or their phone, that's me. All right, well, we're gonna let it almost die a little bit more because my charger fell behind my desk and I'm too lazy to get it. So we'll wait until it's red. 14%, we're getting close though. All right, so ID number. So do you, when you add data to a row in your database, you have to define what that data is. Yeah, Nisha's gonna save us all. So let's say for my book, I want like the name of the book, maybe I want the author of the book, and maybe I want the price of the book, right? I am going to, as the user, I'm going to enter all of that information. Am I going to enter the ID myself? Does that question make sense? Okay, no, probably not. We want it to be auto-generated, okay? That's why we're going to use this up here. So that way, our database knows, hey, we're not entering an ID. I'm not keeping track of which number we're at in terms of book. You're going to do that, Postgres. Please and thank you. Okay, so that's what you add for this primary generated column. All right, for the rest of your columns, you're just going to usually name them column. There's other things that you can do too. And then each of these is from type ORM, so you're going to have to add it to the import list. So title, that's a good one. What other things do we want? What other information do we want about our book?
Author.
That's a good one.
Genre.
Ooh, Copilot feels the same. Okay, genre's good. Copilot didn't get that one right though. Anything else?
Price, cost of book.
All right. Price number. All right. I'm going to say that's probably enough. I was thinking maybe like, yeah, quantity or copies.
Oh, yes.
But I feel like, I don't, addition, that's good. Yeah, there's a lot of ways we could go with this. So we'll keep it with this because you also have to remember that we on the front end have to create a form to add all of this. So that's why I'm thinking of like, do I really want to create all of these form validations? Thank you, Carla. But yes, like, you know, validating form input is not my favorite. So, all right, but maybe we should add an API on the, like a existing API on the front end. We just type in the title and then we get all the data. Who knows? All right. So now we have all of this, okay? You could also add a default value, right? So like you could have, like this one's a good one, is active Boolean, default is true, right? So you could, I'm drawing a blank, but like in stock could be one, true or false. All right, so now we have our entity. So what is happening here when we have this synchronized set as true, all right, is that our API, our code here, is automatically going to read, look for entities, and then it's going to say, hey, we have an entity. Then it's going to go look in our database, and it's going to say, hey, book CRUD table or database, you don't have this table. And then it's going to automatically create that table. All right. So I don't know if I put my entity in the right folder, but let's go ahead and refresh my table and see if that worked. And it did not, because I don't know where I don't think we finished configuring our thing yet. All right, so here is our entity. Now we need to hook up. Okay, yeah, so here's where you add the entities in the app module. So we are going to need, I don't feel like auto load entities is necessary, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And then, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do entities. And I'm going to just import the entity. If I had this, can anybody explain to me what's happening in this line of code?
I think the dir name it kind of like gets you your current directory, and then it will find all the file that is ending with TS or JS. Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of. So basically it is doing a pattern matching, right? So it's looking for in the all of the files, right, within 2 levels of folders that end with entity.ts or entity.js, okay? So it's searching for it. So this is a great way if you don't want to auto import or manually import all of your entities. You would say, so like that would look something like, okay, so I have a folder with a book module, and then within my folder, then I have a file that's like book.entity.ts, right? And then this would go and look through all of my folders, and it would look at the correct level, right? So that's helpful, but ultimately we're not going to do that. Instead, since this is just a simple app with one entity, what's going to be easier is for us to just write book and to import the book entity. All right. Now, when I save, what do you guys think is going to happen? I like where your head's at, Jack. Yes, if I save, it should, if it's doing things right and I didn't miss any steps in the docs because I'm being too chatty, woo, it should pop up in my database. All right. Can anybody tell me why the synchronized true might not be the best thing to use? Yep. So Jack, you are correct. It is looking for the entity and then it's automatically changing your database to match, right? So if I have data, right, in my database, and then I change the entity in a way that gets rid of a column that maybe had data already in it that I needed, and I have it set for synchronized true, it's going to wipe that data. All right. When you are working locally, not the end of the world, right? Because typically when you are making those changes, it's like, well, I don't want that data anymore. Also, I'm working locally, so I'm just testing things. But if you're in production, especially if you like make a mistake and you push a new entity that's not what you want, you could wipe a bunch of production data. So we don't use that. Does anyone know what we would use instead? We would use something called database migrations. All right. So you would keep the entity, you would change the entity, but you would not synchronize it with your data. You would then need to have SQL queries created, right, that update your database. And you would run the queries one at a time to make the changes to your database. And that's going to be a way to make sure you're only making changes that you want. We're not going to go into this now because database migrations are kind of confusing and a little bit complicated, but they're super useful. And we do go over it in excruciating detail in the Build in Public challenge. So if that sounds interesting to you, A, you can look at the docs and there's lots of videos about it. And B, you could take the cohort if you really want more. All right, cool. So now we have our database table. Let's just scan real quick and make sure we didn't forget anything. Oh, they're creating this in the users module. All right, so we probably need to then, so that's type ORM for up. All right, Nisha, you're right. BRB. Let me find my power cord. All right, we're plugged in. All right, so now then we likely want to do type ORM for feature and then add invoke. All right, and the reason we want to do this is so that way we can actually use our entity in our code now. All right, you can see that this defines which repositories are registered in the current scope. With this in place, we can inject the user repository, which is essentially just saying like our table, into the user service and inject repository decorator. All right, so let's go over this. What file did I say? Thank you, Christine. What file did I say that we would use to do all of like the work in our app?
The service file.
Thanks, good job. Yep, so we're gonna go to our service. All right. I am going to then create another function within my app service class, okay? Or rather my method. All right, so let's go ahead and we can say get books is fine because I think the get route is going to be our easiest route. All right, what would happen if I tried to get all the books in my database right now? What would I get? If your answer was nothing, then you are correct, because there's nothing in my database. All right, let me go and see if we can manually add. All right. This is the bad part about trying to use a new system live. All right, I guess we're going to start with create books. All right. So let's go ahead, and I was going to try to just manually add it to the database. All right, so we're going to create a method called create book. All right, and we are going to pass in a book. All right, so our book is going to be of type book. Who here has used TypeScript? How much detail do we want to go into in terms of TypeScript?
Detail meaning.
All right, Jack uses it often, so I guess just ask questions if we get to the point that we have questions, okay? So I'm just going to define the type up here of book, okay? The reason why I'm not using entity is because we're not actually passing in the ID when we create a book, but I am going to use the entity to do this, all right? So I'm going to split my screen, which is that button, and then I'm going to go down and take a look. So my type book, I can't name it book because my entity, wait, why am I writing an entity? All right, so my type book is going to have a title, which is going to be a string. It's going to have an author, which is a string, a genre, which is a string, and a price, which is a string. All right, and then here we're going to say that into this method, we're going to pass in a book, and it is going to be of type book. So that is saying that when I use this method, I'm going to pass one of our book objects to it. Okay. So now we want to do what with that book? We want to add our book to our database. All right. And the way that we're going to do that is by using a constructor. All right. So the constructor, when it creates this class, when we start up our app, is going to inject our book repository in it. So that way we can then use our book table and add information, read information, update information, and delete. So you would go ahead and you would create the constructor. All right. And then within the constructor, you would use the inject repository. And that is going to be from NestJS type ORM. So you would just go ahead and import that. And then you would type in book because that's the entity that we're using. All right. You can see now it's mad because we have 2 books. So we can just say book is bad. I'm going to call it book item because I can't name things right now. All right. And then we'll name this book item. All right. Then we are going to say that this is going to be private, which means that this just isn't public outside of this class. And then we're going to call this book repository. And that is going to be of type repository and then book. All right. Declaration. What are you not mad at? Oh, because I was supposed to pass this in here. Constructors, man. All right, there we go. So now this is just mad that we defined book, but we're not using it. All right. So now what we can do is we can actually use what we're doing with here is we're just creating like a variable that we can then use to communicate with our database. Okay. So we can say const added book is going to be equal to this. Can someone explain to me why I'm using this? that you are referring to the book object that you are creating? Kind of. So I'm using the like the same class that I'm in. So I'm creating this class, and then here are all of the things that I have that I can use. And book repository is one of the things that I can use within that class, so that this refers to the class that I'm creating. And then, so I could also refer to this dot hello, get hello, because that's a method in my class. All right. And so then we need to make this async. So basically what this is saying here is that we're passing a book into this method, and then we are going to add this book to our book repository, which is just saying we're just going to add a row to our table, and we're adding the book. We're going to wait for that to happen, and then once that happens, we're going to return the result. All right. So this is where we're doing the work. We're actually adding the book, but we still need to set up the route, so that way we can use Postgres or front end to actually trigger this adding of a book to happen. So let's go ahead and do that. What type of request would we use in order to send data and add a book to our book repository or our table? Post. Awesome. Yep. So we would go say at post. All right. And yeah, that's from NestJS Common. All right. And then, yeah, we will go ahead and say book. So when we post to the route book, we are going to create a book, and book is going to be of type book item. All right. And then Copilot is just too smart. And then we're going to return this dot app service dot create book, and then pass that book. All right. Book item is not found. So this is actually where we're going to move book item. All right. So we're going to take this book item and we're going to cut it out, because typically you would define the data transfer object. That's what it's called. You would define it in your controller. All right. So we would go ahead and create it here. And we would call this book DTO. All right. Book data transfer object. And then we would put DTO here. Right. Then we would say we'd have to export this. Exporting it means that this would be available in a different file. All right. And then we could use it here. All right. And that will import it from our app controller. Are there any questions for what we just did? All right. So now you can see that we have this post route. And the way that we can see it is if you look in the logs, you can see that it says it mapped the route / book, and it's a post route. All right. DTO is data transfer object, and it is just happens to be kind of the just convention. I'm looking for where we are posting. I guess I could just search. So yeah, here, oh, they're just using a class instead of a type. So I guess we can do that too. So let's be cool. Okay. So yeah, data transfer object. A DTO is an object that defines how the data will be sent over the network. We could determine the data transferred object schema by using TypeScript interfaces or simple classes. So yeah, you can use that. You can use a type too if you want. But that's just kind of convention as to what it's called. All right, so now we are going to open up Postman. And Postman is a way that we can test our API and make requests to it and make sure everything is working without a front end. All right, so save. We're going to create a new tab in Postman. All right, we're going to change this to a post request, and then we're going to do HTTP local host at port 3000, and then we're going to say /book. All right. We need to send a book with it, and that is going to be our DTO in our body. We're going to then select raw and then JSON. All right. And here we're going to put our JSON object, and this is going to be the object that we're sending. So if you look here, this is the information that we need to send. So let's go ahead and do it. Does anybody have a good, simple book that I won't misspell? Cat in the Hat, that's a good one. All right, so Cat in the Hat is our title. And in this, you need everything in quotes. So it would be Cat in the Hat is in quotes and title, the key and value. And then author is going to be Dr. Seuss. And then genre is going to be, what is the genre, guys? Kids? Children? Is that a
Children.
genre?
It's one today.
Children's. I don't know. Whatever. Okay. And then price. How much do we feel a Dr. Seuss book is worth? Youth. Oh, I like youth. Okay. $9.99. All right. So now we're going to press send. All right. What would be a good way to add something to our code so we can actually check if this is working? Or what's, even if we don't add something to the code, like what are we hoping for to happen and how are we going to check that it's successful? Perfect. Yep. Response code 200 D Beaver. That sounds great. All right. So we're going to click send and we get an empty object, which doesn't mean we're wrong because we just returned whatever the database sent back, and we got a 201 created. So that's good. Let's go check Beaver. So we're going to go ahead and refresh, and then we are going to view data. And I don't know about you, but I do not see Dr. Seuss in here. So what do we do now? How do you debug? Thank you. Try a get. Well, we have get hello. The hello world's still there. Let's go make sure we did things right. So here is an example of a post request. Do you see something that maybe we did wrong? We are missing, try async. Yeah, we could try async. Ultimately, in order to get something back, async would be helpful. But yep, body, thank you. Good job, guys. Also, this is why we always read documentation. All right. So body is going to be this. All right. Okay. And then how should we check that we did the body correctly? And it looks like Copilot spoiled it. Copilot is the best of students. So we're going to go ahead and say book and then book. All right. And that way we can go ahead and do this and we can actually see what part of the process things went wrong. All right. So I'm going to send again. And this is looking more correct to me. I don't know about you guys, but we got something back this time. Let's go check Beaver. Do we have to refresh first? This is why I like pgadmin. I know how to use it. I mean, I feel like there's stuff in my database because I got it back, but maybe not. Does anybody like have to leave right at 9 and I'm ruining this for people? All right. So it feels to me like the data didn't go into the database. What are our thoughts? Yeah, Andy, were you having so much fun that you didn't notice the clock? I didn't either. You noticed me just over here, just refreshing over and over. All right, so I don't think it made it into the database. So we did. This should work. Yes. So now we went ahead and we have book. This is what happens also when you listen to Copilot, because it's very possible we just used the wrong type ORM command. So we know that it got here. So that's good. All right, where should we check next? The service. Thank you. So I'm actually going to be lazy and I'm just going to cut that. And I'm going to head over to my service and I'm going to throw it in there. All right. So let's make sure that it's just passing correctly. All right. And let's send it. All right. So we see this console logged. So now that means that we are getting this correctly. All right. So how can I actually see I'm returning what got created? Creates a new entity instance, copies all entity properties from this object into a new entity. Let's go to the docs. It feels like we should also do our get route too, right? All right. Let's just shouldn't. Oh, there isn't a generated ID. Shouldn't have an ID. Yes, it should. So I don't think it is getting added to the database. So this is gonna do find one by delete. I think it's supposed to be save. Does anybody remember? I haven't used, can you tell I haven't used type ORM in a while? Oh, all right. New error. Oh, invalid. So this is a great case of database migrations, right? Can somebody explain what this error is saying? Invalid input syntax for type integer 999.
Yeah, not 999 is like a float or a double, and you input that into integer, which only accept whole number. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right. So let's change this. Let's see if we can change this to, we use float. Doesn't like float. Other idea. Decimal. Feels like number should be fine. But I agree that 999 is not it. So let's go ahead and change this to 10 and see if we get the same error. Ooh, we get an ID this time. So it definitely is the syntax of the number. So what would I go and Google in order to make this work? So let's do type ORM float. How to properly handle decimals with type ORM. That sounds great. Oh, is it decimal with the? Maybe we should just do string. Am I being lazy right now? Yes. Is it past 9? Yes. All right. Did I not? Oh, string. Type number not, but I changed it here. Unable to connect to database. Because column price. So this is a good example of how string always works. Oh, real? Thanks, Roberto. We can try that in a second. But this is an example of how things get messed up when you're using this, what's it called? Without using migrations. Does anyone see delete? Relation book continue. Right. So see how I just had to drop my table in order to get that to work. And then it went ahead and remade my table, but then we just lost all of our data. So this would be a, yep, thank you, Jack. Sorry, I didn't see that at the time, but this would be a very good example of why you wouldn't want to use that synchronized true. All right, but now that that's started back up, let's go ahead and give this a try. And that worked. And then let's go ahead and do, oh, data type is int4 in dbeaver. Interesting. And real, did we think real? All right, we won't worry about that. All right, so we have our create route done. Before we end, we'll continue and pick up from back here. So let's go ahead and commit our changes to GitHub. So you would do git status, all right, git add. Now, please note that we hard coded our username and password in order to get into our database. So you should not push this to GitHub before removing it and putting it in an env. So I guess that's where we'll start out in the next one. But before we go, what are our thoughts on live coding? Fun, not fun, helpful? What do we think?
I think it was helpful for me. Are you gonna send the link to the video once it's up? Because I didn't code because I was trying to watch.
Oh, yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I'll post it on YouTube tomorrow. And then I'll put the link. I'll just put the link on my YouTube or on my LinkedIn.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
This
Cool,
was
love.
super helpful, Callie. Thank you. I
All
loved
right.
it.
Yay. So yeah, I mean, feel free to continue. Yeah, I'm fine with the link to my repo. I mean, none of this code is gonna get used for anything. So yeah, so I'm thinking we'll just do this every other week. We'll have a guest speaker on the other weeks. Yep. Ask any questions. This is for all of us to kind of just get better, learn new things, learn more deeply. I don't do full stack development anymore during my day job, so it's fun for me to have an outlet to do that too. All right.
It is awesome, Kelly. I got to see your debugging process.
Add a bunch of logs in. Am I right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll do this every other, but feel free to keep working on it. Come with questions. And next, every other will be a guest speaker. So yeah, hopefully this is cool. Yes, Carla.
Hey, Callie, thanks again for tonight. It was great. For the following weeks, are we using the same link or should we just check on your LinkedIn for a new Zoom link?
It should be the same link every single time because I set up like a coding with Callie meetup on my Google Calendar. And so it's just the same one. I stopped inviting people to it though because I was spamming everyone on accident. Because ironically, I'm really bad with computers. So yeah, so it should be the same link. I'm just gonna keep that going up. But yes, it'll be every other week. And then if this is interesting to you, this is just what Build in Public is going to be like, but Build in Public is just kind of like the next step up. So if this is good and you're feeling good about this, then go ahead. Does this link work? Oh, that's our Slack. So yeah, join our Slack because I post it in Slack every week too. Thank you, Christine. Christine is also the instructor, by the way, for the Build in Public cohort, which is also why she's linking all these docs because she's like my brain. Okay. Any other questions or comments or thoughts before we go?
Well, I have a question. Would you mind I steal Christine over to our startup, Callie? No, just kidding.
No, I don't mind at all. I want the best opportunities for Christine. If you're going to pay her, steal her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. Okay.
Yes, Jack, but yeah. I mean, Christine does make a percentage of everyone who buys the Build in Public cohort. So, but I mean, we're not in this to like make $1 million. But Jay, if you are in it to make $1 million, for sure pay Christine. Yes, Jack, this is every other week. And then guest hosts in between. Anything else? Cool. I'll see you guys hopefully next week for a guest speaker, but if not, in 2 weeks. Bye, y'all.
Bye.